Candidates, obviously a massive part of that sales job and that recruiter resourcer job. But for me, quickly I established that what I really enjoyed was some of the elements around process, shaping processes, thinking about how things should be done, how things shouldn't be done, trying to make improvements to the way that we did things. So my role moved from being a resourcer through into being an account manager. Part of our account management team, which involves taking more responsibility for particular clients, more responsibility for ensuring performance with particular clients. Also evolved to being a lead recruiter at one point, which involved doing some more activities around training new team members, looking at how we performed in audit within that particular team. And as I said, as my role changed and the team grew, took on slightly more responsibilities, I was able to really see the bits of the role that were my particular strengths. So Outsource was quite a small business at that stage, and I appreciate I was quite lucky in that I had the space to make the role what I wanted it to be. So for me, that's about creating order, implementing change, documenting processes, thinking about things and ways that we can make improvements. And so I continued to do that for quite a few years. And eventually we got to a situation where we had an office manager who was looking after the Swindon branch of Outsource. And that person left, and it gave us the opportunity, or gave my manager at the time the opportunity to think about how we could fill that position, how we could make that position a bit different. And so at that point, I moved into the role of Office and Compliance Manager for Outsource, which was a completely different part of the business, and obviously a complete departure away from the sales side of the business, from actually doing our day-to-day bread and butter of looking at roles and placing candidates. And from there, really, what I've done is been able to create the role that I've wanted. So as part of that Office and Compliance Manager role, I had a lot of scope to think about process improvement for the business, think about change, think about things that we were doing or that we weren't doing rather, that other companies of a similar size were doing. And I was kind of in the fortunate position that I was able to shape my role into what I wanted it to be. So people think it's quite strange that my role is marketing, compliance and contractor care, and sometimes people think it's a strange mix to be the person that owns both the marketing and the compliance division. You might think marketing is kind of creative, all about new and innovative ways of doing things, about thinking outside the box, thinking about all the kind of social media and comms aspects that a marketing department has to cover, whereas obviously compliance is much more about structure and process, audit, all kind of ticking the box, making sure that everything is done as it's supposed to be. And sometimes people think it's a strange thing that those two roles are combined at Outsource. But I think that goes some way to sort of proving what I'm sort of trying to say, which is that you can, as part of your career journey, shape your own role and make your role what you want it to be in terms of the things that really inspire you and make you want to get out of bed in the morning. So for me, compliance is a massive part and a massive priority for Outsource. And a lot of our sales activities are based around our compliance and how we focus on being completely ethical and working in partnership with our clients. So actually I'm able to pull all of those things together as part and parcel of those two roles. If I move on to the next slide that I've got quickly. As I was saying, what I've been able to do is really focus on the things that challenge and inspire me and make me feel animated and excited in my role. So as part of my career progression and part of how I've been managed is that I've done lots of personality assessments and lots of kind of, things to identify what are the things that that really motivate me and make me inspired in my role. And it's all about change, it's all about new activities, it's all about making improvements and about, what comes next. And you have to have a balance. You can't always be constantly evolving and changing into a new role, every 5 minutes. But I think if you can take the things that really inspire you, really animate you, and make them the things that you're always striving for next, for me personally, that's how I can really find my passion in my role and continue to make it what I want it to be. I think there are some benefits to working for quite a small company. because you do sometimes have quite a lot of freedom to kind of stake your claim and make the role, make your job what you want it to be, and tell your boss what you want to do next. And, you know, I have been lucky at Outsource. We have had really receptive managers who have allowed me to do that. But at the same time, if you work for a larger company, there are additional benefits there in terms of there's more kind of structure, there's grades that you can progress through. There's bigger HR functions that can help you really identify and manage your own continual personal development. So I think whether it's a large or a small company, there are lots of ways that you can really take control over your career and your career progression. And as I said, I think for me the key kind of takeaway is just thinking about what I really care about, what really inspires me and makes me enthusiastic about my role. And obviously, you know, there are still some days when my job is not entirely perfect, and I will always have up and down days. But I think if you can, through identifying what you really care about, make your role something that on a day-to-day basis you do find inspiring and challenging, then on the whole, you know, you can feel that you have found your passion in the role that you're doing.
I can see, thank you Vicky, I can see that we've had a question come in, so just to let everybody know, it is on listen only mode, but if you do have any questions, please do write them in the chat box, and we can continue to monitor this and ask the questions of the presenters. So we've had a question come in here, Victoria, that I'm hoping that you can help us with. Do you have any advice for how to structure the conversation with your boss if you feel that you do want to make a change?
So what I've always done is kind of, and again it's because I've worked for a small company, I've always been able to try and start doing something before I go and ask my manager for it, if that makes sense. So where I've seen in previous roles or previous areas that I've worked in, there's a scope or there's a potential for us to do something differently, or there's a potential for us to make a change or make an improvement, I've always tried to sort of get started on it and then go to my manager or my boss and then sort of say, well actually, you know, I think we could do this, here's what I've done towards it, and have a kind of case behind me for trying to suggest where I want to personally go. And in my experience, being able to do that and kind of not just constantly be asking for things, but being able to prove where you can really add value and where you've already had the motivation and the kind of self drive, if you like, to go and start doing something before someone actually officially tells you to. I think that's a really good way to kind of show your managers where you want to go and drive that forward yourself.
You've mentioned when you were kind of explaining how you sort of identified the areas that you found inspiring, that you've done various personality tests and things in the past. Is there anything that you can recommend to our listeners that they could use, maybe perhaps online, or any documents that perhaps you've got that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, certainly. I can certainly send some links for some of the things that I've looked at. There are lots of different ones available. There's ones about where your personality is defined by a colour. You go through, answer a series of questions, and then it kind of gives you a result based on their kind of sort of behind-the-scenes analysis of what sort of personality type you are. And those things are quite useful, I think, because it just helps you to kind of recenter what your priorities are, and sometimes when you do them, it makes you kind of stop and reevaluate, what your own priorities are, what your own passions are, what are the things that really matter to you on a day-to-day basis. So certainly, I can send some links to Claire that she can circulate, and I would say that's worth doing if you're in a position where you're not quite sure, what elements of previous roles or you particularly enjoyed, or you're not quite sure what direction to go into next. Doing something like that can help you kind of analyse yourself and think about, where you might want to take your next step.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vicky. We're just going to move on now then to Marcus. Welcome, Marcus, to the webinar. Vicky is still on here, so if anyone does have any more questions, please feel free to keep writing them and we can come back to them at the end. So just to flick back to a previous slide, we've got Marcus Jones, Executive Coach, Benton Jones Associates, on the call as well. So first of all, can I please ask you to introduce yourself, Marcus, and we'll hand over to you.
Yeah, certainly. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
One person say yes, that'd be great, because I was slightly muted. My name's Marcus Jones. I'm an elite performance executive coach, and my experience has been with running businesses, being managing director of a couple of businesses of various different sizes, been through mergers, acquisitions, private equity purchases, massive growth businesses, declining businesses. So my experience commercially is very strong. But what I've done the last few years is really look back at my career and looked at what I really, really enjoyed, and that was ultimately getting reward from developing people. So from that, I took the sort of path into doing several diplomas into performance executive coaching and corporate coaching, which is why I got involved with this phone call. And thank you for having me on. I'm very grateful for the opportunity and very humble that you've asked me to do it, which is great. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Vicky, really. Thank you for sharing that story. That's a really empowering story for finding passion and purpose. And actually, there's quite a large movement corporately at the moment to look at things like what they're calling role crafting, which is looking at, how do you shape your role to fulfill your own values and your own purpose. And there are people who can go into businesses and help do that, mainly in the coaching sphere. There's people who do that, and looking at how you can look at what you've enjoyed and do what I've done, and what Vicky's done, which is look at what you've enjoyed over your career and just have a long, hard think about it, really. And money's not everything, prestige is not everything. Actually, it's about what you actually get in a sense of purpose and passion within yourself that is going to drive you forward. So being able for Vicky to be able to shape her role was a great opportunity and one of great courage for her, because when you are crafting roles, you do really need to be looking at things like, well, how can you craft the tasks that you do, and how can you craft the relationships that you have, and also how you potentially define your role. You've probably all heard the sort of famous business story that comes out about when John F. Kennedy went in to see the Apollo space mission and got chatting to the janitor there and said, what do you do? And he replied to him, I'm putting a man on the moon. And that's exactly what that purpose about redefining what your definition is for you to own that. And there's a big study done in North America around hospital cleaners, and the most satisfied of those cleaners were ones that actually felt that they were really participating in and helping in the healing process. So it's actually how they feel their own value is in what they do, which is really, really important. So that's the sort of covering off quickly what Vicky was talking about, which is the role crafting. But just to take it up a notch a little bit, you've got my slide up, brilliant. For me, your passion will come out of your purpose. And there's a lot of talk, at the moment in the world generally about, that we are all our own individual leaders. We are all leaders in our own right. We're in the age of authenticity. And actually, how can we go about really, really working closely to our values and how we can sense our purpose? Now, for me, the definition of purpose is a life aim that stimulates and motivates your behavior. So that gives an emotional payoff rather than it being a thing. I mean, everyone wants to earn a decent salary, but ultimately it is that emotional payoff that's going to allow you to sort of thrive as an individual. So, the first errors that people do make when they're looking at that, their purpose and understanding their values, is they're really looking at external validation. So it's the purchasing of things and having the right car and having the right image and having the right suit and everything. And really that's the first mistake that everyone does, is you've really got to stop pursuing that external validation and allow yourself to be a bit more vulnerable into actually what really, really drives you. So it's about living in one's nature perfectly. And that's really important, because you've got to understand what your key values are. And there is a slide, I think, after this one, which has just a list of a few values. So if we can flick onto it quickly. Just a big brain dump of what a load of different values could be, and the last one being lots of different question marks, because these are all yours. These are just an idea for you to think, well, actually, is loyalty something that's important to me? Is power something that's important to me? Is creativity important to me? None of these are wrong. They're all great and they're all valuable, and they're your own personal values. So you've really got to try and understand those, and it takes a lot of work and self-reflection to to go into those. So we've just wanted to give that to you, so you've got that as something as a reference point. And if we're happy to just flick back to the other slide by way of a sort of holding statement, because most of my content is verbal. So in terms of then looking at why purpose is really important, well, apart from the obvious in terms of emotional feeling, there's been quite a lot of peer-reviewed studies around the physiological benefits of purpose. And without wanting to go into too much detail, it increases your high density lipoprotein, which gives you a release of antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. It reduces, ultimately that's good cholesterol. It reduces bad cholesterol, and it reduces the A1C. From that, comes down to collaboration increases, and species who want to work in collaboration. So, also, to say, important. What she's doing great. Also, those masks a little bit. That makes you come forward in where you might be socially. Naturally want to think about that's interested in. And you really want to get one of those things just keep an eye self-aware when those things. To back and looking at what you've been good at, and looking at what you've been bad at, and looking at what you do want and what you don't want. And I think it's really important when you look back over your life, your professional careers, you've got to look at, well, what did I not enjoy? What did I like and what did I not like? And you've got to get rid of all the noise when you're thinking about those things, because some of those things sometimes will come up with some emotions, and those emotions are signals to say that actually that's quite important. And if you can get rid of those emotions and sort of have a degree of emotional sobriety when you're looking back at those things and reflecting on things that you didn't like and you do like, then you'll get a great wisdom from that. I think there's saying, a memory without an emotion is wisdom. And I think that's really, really important to just reflect on those. In terms of sort of getting you going, I think there are three key areas for looking at what your purpose would be. It's looking for a motivational prompt. So if you're motivated, then that's as good as any. That's as good a motivational prompt as any the motivational prompt. So just be aware of what that might be. The second one will be that again around role crafting is looking at what's the purpose for what I'm doing. If you're doing something that's not necessarily enjoyable, then it's really got to look at, okay, what am I doing it for? And if it's and caring for loved ones, drawing an income for caring for loved ones or paying for some care or whatever it might be is really, really important motivator. And also thirdly and most importantly really is a mission that's greater than yourself. Because that will really drive you to sort of have a legacy, I guess, and be of service. And that's one of the key points around this is don't be afraid to be used. And I know that sounds terrible, but it's being of service to other people is just something that's very, very rewarding. Most people will know that. And it's being able to cultivate that in that service to others and focus on solving a problem. Focus on solving a problem more than solving a problem with yourself, if that makes sense. You've got to be more you've got to look at intrinsically rather than extrinsically to see, well, what value can I add to the world here? And when you're being used, I mean, there's a guy called Dr. Joe Martin who talks about this quite a lot. He talks about make sure that you are being used, but not abused, misused, or confused. So I think that's quite an important statement in terms of making sure that you can be of service to other people. You've got to look at a point of intentionality, get clarity about what you're actually wanting to do. Get that vision, really understand that vision, dream it, see it through, and actually try and get a plan in place about what that's going to be. And I can give you some thoughts of how we can give some practical action of how to get some of those things forward. In terms of self-direction, you've really got to look at, be aware of what your attitude is, be aware of taking action, because that's really, really important, and that courage is the first start for finding your purpose. Really understand more about your feelings and your thoughts, and then look at your aims as well. And I think understanding aims is really important, and remember that goals are really important in life, and if you don't know how to set goals, then someone needs to talk to me about that. But setting goals is not a purpose. Don't mistake goals for being a purpose. A goal is something that is part of the journey overall of what your purpose is. And if you have a goal that I think will make you happy, then you're not on purpose. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be happy, but if you're actually if you have a goal that says, oh, this thing will make me happy, then that is not your purpose. And just don't fall down that trap. So one of the key things I think is important, again, is I talk about this quite a lot, is that sort of emotional awareness stuff. Do sort of wake up every day if you can and have a little journal next to you and spend the first 10 minutes of the day just looking at, okay, how do I want to feel today? And then that's the emotional awareness side. Then you need to sort of overlay some emotional intelligence to it. So, well, okay, so if this is how I feel today, how am I going to provide that? How am I going to give that to myself today? And then from that, look at the emotional fitness, which is, well, okay, how am I going to do it? Let's do it and keep doing it. And I think that's a real starting point. So I was really quite keen to give you some tools really today, because purpose isn't something that just lands in your lap. It's your career, it's your life. You've got to lead yourself through it, and it's up to you how to do it. And so what I would like to suggest that you all do is over the next 30 days, if you look at every day, at the end of the day, look at 3 reasons why you've enjoyed what you've done that day. Give you 3 reasons why you've enjoyed it. 3 reasons why you're grateful, and there's a lot of talk about gratitude diaries and being grateful, and that's really important. And it's not fluffy and a soccer skill. It primes if you do it at the end of the day, it primes your subconscious overnight to attack the day in the same positive way the next day. 3 reasons for being grateful, and then write down 3 values. And now if you do that every day for 30 days, you will have a lot of repetition, and within that repetition is probably going to be your purpose. That's going to give you, if you do 3 reasons why you enjoy what you do, 3 reasons to be grateful, and 3 values every day for 30 days, that's going to give you 270 sets of data. And if you can't get some information out of 270 sets of data, then I don't know what's going on. There'll be lots of repetition there. And I think from that information, you'll be able to see what's drawing out about what your purpose and passion could be. From that information, I think you really need to start writing down some constructed statements about what you want to be, what you want to do, and why you want to do it. So it's a to-be statement, why I want to be this person, a to-do statement, because I want to do this, and a so that I can statement. So I want to be a exceptional business performance coach, so that I can help people within their job and see them grow. And then, so what? Well, so I can actually get a real sense of purpose, and I can drive an income to support my family. I think finally, and I can drop those questions to people if they need to, those 30-day challenge, if anyone needs a reminder on that. Finally, I think, we are a species that likes to collaborate, and I think with accountability you get things done. So find someone you trust and find someone that will hold you accountable and get them to help you do this process of finding what your purpose is. Because when you have that accountability, you will definitely achieve it. And not that I want to end on a negative, I think you've really got to be careful. Things to avoid are superiority. Try and be humble. Don't try and dip that. Don't sort of tip the balance of dignity and self-respect into sort of conceit and arrogance. And don't fall into dissatisfaction. Really pull yourself back and be grateful for the smallest of things that satisfy you. Just really drill into those. And don't suffer from any neglect either. If things aren't going well for you, then slow down. Say no more. And just stay on the mission. Stay on the mission of finding those things that you enjoy, and that will come forward. And I think that's pretty much it for what I've got to say. It might be over time, probably.
Thank you so much, Marcus. That's great. Does anyone have any questions at all for Marcus or Victoria? If you do, please feel free to write them in the box. I can see that one's being typed at the moment. I've in the past, and this is a question to both of you, so in the past I've used something that I've called previously a skill will matrix, where I've identified my strengths and weaknesses within the roles that I've done. I know also that there's tons and tons of books out there that you can buy, such as Strengths Finder, to try to identify, where your sort of top 5 talents are. Are there any personality profiling tools, Marcus or Victoria, that you could recommend to our listeners that they could use, say sort of spending a fortune on all of these books that you find all the time on Amazon?
Yeah, and I think I've already bought them and read them all for everyone else. I think that's the point. I think Insights is very good, and Victoria touched on that, which is the colours thing. So it's really understanding whether you're they give you the colours of being yellow, green, red and blue, I think. That's really, really important. Myers-Briggs is always a pretty good one, so it gives you that view of whether you're also introverted, extroverted and other areas. And the skill will matrix, again, is good. Skills Finder 2.0, I think, or Strengths Finder 2.0 was a good one. You can Google all of those. I think, again, sort of not wanted to sort of repeat some of my content, but they're really, really useful. They're really, really useful as a guide. But don't live your life by them, because just because you come out as an introvert doesn't mean you can't do things that would normally be an extrovert's role. Those measurements, and I talk about this when preparing people for interviews, is there's a fine balance between making a judgment on the person based on their personality profile and that having any bearing at all on their ability to be able to achieve successfully. Because people can achieve successfully regardless of whether they're introvert, extrovert, whether they're X score, Y score, whether they're red, blue, green or indifferent. But they are useful guides to understand how you can work with others and play well with others, as they say.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, I'm afraid, because I didn't brief you on this. But can I ask you, please, so for anybody who is in a role, but perhaps, sort of thinking that they may want to change the role they're doing, or for anyone on the call who is out of work at the moment and sort of desperately seeking what to look for next, what's the first thing that you can advise that those people do? So if there's one thing that they can do this afternoon or tomorrow to start this process of identifying their passion, can you give your one tip, please, both of you?
So for me, I think if that was going to be my situation, I probably would sit and just list out what my favourite things about the role that I've been doing most recently were, and I would just try and be really honest with myself, not about the things that I think I should enjoy doing, or the things that if I was, because sometimes you can get an idea in your head about where your career should go on paper or the next logical step on paper, but that isn't necessarily what you actually want to do deep down. So I think if I was in the position where I was going to look for a new job tomorrow, or I wanted to try and have some sort of career change, I would sit down and really try and be honest with myself about what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy, and why those things were. Because there are elements of my job that are not my favourite, but I see where they fit into the bigger picture, and I see where they can contribute to ultimately where I want to go. So therefore I'm happy with those things, and there are other elements that I really feel passionate about and that I really enjoy. And I think if I was going to look for a career change, I'd be trying to really identify what those things are, and then thinking, okay, so what could it be that would fit those things, and just try and take away the job title, the salary if you can, and think about on a nuts and bolts level, what is it that you're excited about and that you feel interested in, and I would try and start there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think time and time again it's been proven that money is hugely important, but if you can just ignore it and put it to one side and follow a passion, it sort of falls into place, and you'll have whatever you need. It'll be a needs-based thing. You won't necessarily make a fortune, but you will be happier and you will be engaged with what you do. I think in terms of a definable action of what they can do this afternoon, it is those. For me, is that 30 days is not an afternoon, but it's start that 30-day challenge. Really, as Vicky said, look at what you've been good at, look at what you've enjoyed. And if you're currently in a role, because that was part of the question, was you can try and craft that role. Really look at what are the tasks you enjoy, what are the people and what relationships you want with people, and what is the definition for you of what that good role looks like. And remember, you own it. No one's going to drop this in your lap for you. And that's where Vicky's been successful in terms of going, okay, what do I want to do? I'm going to craft this and shape this myself, and finding the right people who will support her in that business. Because if Outsource UK wouldn't have done it, Vicky would no longer be there. She would have been somewhere else doing it really successfully, because it would have been a purpose and it would have been something that's come through. So don't be frightened of that. And I think that key then for me is going on what I talked about earlier is just be self-aware of what your fears are. If you can pick up on your fear, just really ask your question about what is that fear? What is it that worries you? Because the chances are there's something in that. There's going to be something in that fear. What are you scared of doing? Because that's probably holding you back a little bit. And that's from self-doubt. And self-doubt that I've suffered from hugely throughout my entire career, and it's something that I battle with daily. But when I battle it, it's brilliant. The outcomes are exceptional. And you see people who've got a lot of self-doubt who, they'll overeat, they'll over-socialise, they'll self-medicate, they'll watch too much television. All these sort of things, you'll see that all of that comes from fear. All of it comes from fear. So what are you that you're frightened of? Because as soon as you can start pushing the edges of that, you will look after yourself. As I said earlier, it's the brain's way of telling your body to stay healthy. And that's where the phrase, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What makes you jump out of bed every morning? Those are the things that will drive you. So just really be self-aware. And I guess, if you want to do something this afternoon that's practical action, start a meditation.
Thank you. And so I guess what I've taken from this then is the crucial word here is why. So why don't you enjoy doing what you're doing? Why do you enjoy doing what you're doing? Always ask yourself for any of those sort of skills that you identify, why is it that's something that you've put a positive or a negative next to, and how can you explore that further? Before we move on today then, first of all, I'd like to thank Vicky and Marcus again for their time. It's really well appreciated. Does anybody else have any questions before we look to close today's webinar? I can see no one further typing. Sorry, Marcus?
I think Rosie put something about it'd be really helpful if you can just have the action sheets afterwards. So I'll type up that 30-day thing and get that through.
Lovely, so fantastic. That's perfect. Thank you so much. I know that there were some technical issues at the beginning with the sound. All that you did miss was me just covering off the initial slides sort of introducing the webinar, but it is all recorded. I will send it out to everybody who joined today, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel. So if you search Outsource UK How To via YouTube, then you will see the 4 previous webinars, and today's will be uploaded shortly. We've got one more to follow in the series next month, which is how to succeed at interviewing. So we'll send out details of that webinar shortly. And if you do have any questions at all, I'm Claire Farrow, and you can contact me at diversity@outsource-uk.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And likewise, I'm sure that I'm not speaking out of turn. If you have any questions for Vicky or Marcus, you can find both of them on LinkedIn as well. And thank you very much for your time today, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank
you. Bye.
Bye.